Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a single meeting, right? One meeting with the power to potentially fundamentally redraw the map of an entire region. That's exactly what we're diving into today. High stakes, to say the least.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating here, I think, is seeing how all these different threads, things that seem separate, international diplomacy, domestic policy, they all just converge.
Yeah.
It creates this incredibly complex web of, well, challenges, but also opportunities.
Yeah, it really does. So our focus today is squarely on this pivotal White House meeting, President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And our mission, really, in this deep dive, is to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge from all the insights we've gathered. We want to help you quickly grasp the critical elements, understand what's really at stake without getting totally swamped by all the information flying around.
Precisely. The goal is for you to walk away not just knowing what happened, but maybe understanding a bit more about the why, the deeper currents shaping things.
Okay, so let's start with what we're hearing out of Jerusalem. The main agenda items expected for this meeting are, frankly, huge. We're talking a possible hostage and ceasefire deal in Gaza. Then there's dealing with Iran's proxies in the region, and maybe the most ambitious part, expanding the Abraham Accords.
Each one of those is massive on its own.
Exactly. Discussing them all together really shows you the complexity of regional stability right now.
And looking at it from Netanyahu's side, well, he arrived with a pretty clear message. He wanted to thank President Trump for, and this is his quote, his very strong mobilization in favor of Israel. He even said, we've never had such a friend in the White House. He credited their joint mobilization for what he called a great victory over our common enemy, Iran.
That's strong language, not just standard diplomatic talk.
No, not at all. It really underscores this, this deep alignment, maybe even a personal bond. That's kind of the backdrop for these talks. For you listening, that relationship isn't just fluff. It's actually a critical factor in how these negotiations might proceed.
It definitely sets a particular tone, doesn't it? Okay, let's zero in on Gaza first. It's constantly in the news, top of mind for so many. The urgency around getting a ceasefire, getting the hostages back, you can feel it. We know Israel sent a team to Doha specifically to hammer out a 60-day ceasefire and hostage exchange.
Right, that was the goal going in.
And President Trump added to that pressure, didn't he? He publicly said he expected a deal, quote, this week. That kind of timeline puts everyone on the spot.
It does, but then you hit this immediate wall, which is Netanyahu's very firm stance. He hasn't minced words. He blasted the latest terms from Hamas as unacceptable. His bottom line is clear. Any agreement must guarantee the elimination of Hamas as a military force, full stop.
So hope for a deal on one side, but a very hard line on the other.
Exactly. And his focus isn't just ending the fighting, it's about fundamentally changing the security situation. He's determined to get all 20 living hostages back while acknowledging the awful reality of the 30 known dead. For him, it boils down to, quote, one thing, the elimination of Hamas military and governmental power.
That's unambiguous.
Very. And then there's this interesting bit of intel reported by the BBC. An anonymous official supposedly said Hamas has lost its grip on most of Gaza, and even more striking, that 95% of its leadership is dead. Now, if that's accurate...
Wow, 95%. That would dramatically change the picture of Hamas's ability to function or negotiate, wouldn't it?
It certainly complicates the calculus for everyone involved. It raises questions about who you're even negotiating with long-term.
Okay, so given Netanyahu's very clear position, what was the White House's immediate priority, especially with that constant pressure, those calls to bring them home?
Well, reports from D.C. suggest the primary goal for President Trump was indeed to broker that deal between Israel and Hamas and get the hostages back.
Yeah.
It was described as absolutely top of mind for him. He hears that demand constantly.
But brokering a deal with Hamas, that's notoriously difficult.
Extremely difficult. As the reports note, Hamas has consistently used hostages as a negotiating chip. It's their main source of leverage. The president seemed hopeful, though, about maybe an incremental release. Starting small, perhaps securing 8 to 10 hostages in this deal.
Kind of a first step to build momentum.
Exactly. Get that initial release, trigger the ceasefire, and then hopefully start brokering for a better peace throughout the Middle East.
Right.
But, and this is a huge but, it immediately brings up the long-term question, what happens in Gaza after the fighting stops? If, as some argue, the ideology of hatred against Jews, against Israel persists, then just stopping the shooting doesn't solve the underlying problem, does it?
No, it feels like you could just end up back in the same place later on. You need a plan for governance for the future.
Right. Are you just pausing the conflict or actually resolving it?
And on that specific point, President Trump has apparently weighed in before. He's sort of gave his hand,
Mhm.
suggesting a pretty radical idea. The United States control Gaza.
Wow, U.S. control. That's a major step.
Yeah. He's clearly stated his view that for any real peace, Hamas can no longer be in power. He sees them as detrimental, not just to Israel, but to the future of the Palestinians, too, and the whole region. It suggests a potential shift, maybe, towards more direct U.S. involvement, which would be a huge undertaking.
A massive strategic shift. Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears now to another huge item on the agenda, Iran. Always a major flashpoint. Netanyahu was expected to ask for something extraordinary here, essentially a green light from the U.S.
The green light to do what, exact?
To strike Iranian nuclear facilities if Israeli intelligence detects, suspicious activity, like a move towards building a weapon.
That is an enormous request. The implications are just staggering. It could reshape the entire region, trigger who knows what kind of response.
Absolutely. It tests non-proliferation norms, alliances, everything.
And it's not just about the nuclear program, right? Netanyahu was also pushing for stronger action against Iran's regional proxies, specifically mentioning the Houthis in Yemen, noting they just resumed attacks on Israel and shipping over the weekend.
Right. Those proxy groups are how Iran projects power without direct confrontation.
Exactly. They're funded, trained, armed by Iran. So targeting them is seen as a way to hit back at Iran indirectly to degrade their influence.
And we saw immediate action on that front, didn't we? Overnight, Israel launched pretty extensive airstrikes in Yemen, hitting Houthi ports, radar sites, even a power station.
And this wasn't out of the blue. It followed another Houthi missile launch towards Israel and also that attack on the Greek cargo ship in the Red Sea, which was apparently their first successful maritime strike in over a year.
So things escalated quickly.
Right.
It just shows how volatile the situation is and why these talks about Iran and its proxies are so critical.
Absolutely urgent.
Yet, despite all this tension, Netanyahu also expressed some optimism about expanding peace efforts. He said, there's also a great opportunity to expand the circle of peace, far beyond what we could have imagined before. Kind of surprising, given the circumstances.
It is. And maybe the most surprising element of that potential expansion is this development concerning Hebron. Reports suggest that 5 clan sheikhs from Hebron have formally asked to break away from the Palestinian Authority.
Break away and do
and join the Abraham Accords, which crucially involves recognizing Israel as a Jewish state.
Wow, that's unexpected. What does that signify?
Well, it's potentially huge. It raises questions about shifting loyalties, maybe grassroots movements bypassing the traditional leadership. It could be a new way to build peace, sort of bottom up. Or, it could just deepen internal Palestinian divisions even further. It's definitely something to watch closely.
A real wild card in the regional dynamics. Now, amidst all this high-level maneuvering, we also have to acknowledge the terrible human cost on the ground in Gaza. We heard that 2 American aid workers are still hospitalized after a terrorist attack.
Yes, an attack on the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And the details are quite grim. These individuals were described as highly decorated veterans. They were simply distributing food at a U.S.-funded humanitarian site near Khan Yunis when they were hit by grenades.
It just highlights the incredible danger aid workers face in these zones.
It really does. And it complicates everything when humanitarian efforts themselves become targets. It underscores the human tragedy behind all the politics.
Definitely puts things in perspective. Okay, so shifting focus slightly, but it's relevant context. President Trump came into this meeting off the back of a significant domestic win, what he calls the Big Beautiful Bill. Having that legislative victory, that political capital, surely impacts his negotiating position internationally, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that bill itself is a perfect example of the political divide in the U.S. right now. Democrats slammed it, calling it the big ugly bill, essentially a tax break for billionaires.
But the White House pushes back hard on that narrative.
Very hard. They call that a myth, arguing it's actually the largest tax cut in history for lower and middle class Americans. They're talking potentially $10,000 in added tax breaks for families. The idea they promote is parallel prosperity benefits for everyone, designed to return people to the workplace.
It sounds like classic supply-side arguments versus demand-side concerns.
Pretty much. And for you listening, the interesting part is digging into how the bill aims to do that and why economists disagree so strongly on the likely outcomes.
And it wasn't just taxes, was it? It was a massive bill, over 900 pages. It included things like border security funding and a big push for expanding domestic energy production, that whole drill baby drill idea.
Right. A very broad domestic agenda reflected there.
There were also some concerns about Medicaid initially.
Yes, but the White House clarified. They stated it will not impact Medicaid for vulnerable groups, pregnant women, people with disabilities, lower-income folks. They said the focus there is specifically on tackling waste, fraud, and abuse in the system, not cutting core benefits.
Okay, so a mix of economic, security, and energy policies, all wrapped up in one domestic package.
And connecting that back to the international stage, look at trade policy. President Trump extended the deadline for imposing certain tariffs to August 1st. It seems like a tactic, right, to give more time to bring more countries to the negotiating table.
Following the deals already made with China and Vietnam.
Exactly. It's part of this broader strategy to reshape global trade using tariffs as leverage.
And the stick is pretty clear. If countries refuse to do business with the United States or bring your manufacturing base here, then those tougher tariffs, some 10 to 50%, kick back in on April 2nd.
It's a very direct, America-first approach to trade negotiations. Strong-arm tactics, some would say.
Definitely sends a clear message.
So if you step back and connect all these dots, the future of Gaza, the challenge from Iran, the potential expansion of peace accords, and these domestic economic policies like the tax bill and tariffs, you really start to see how interconnected everything is. Understanding one piece helps you understand the leverage and the strategy behind the others. Nothing happens in a vacuum.
Absolutely. So what does this all mean for you listening to this?
Well, the outcomes here from these meetings, these policies, they have really profound impacts, not just in the Middle East, but on global stability, on international relations, on economies everywhere. It's just such a clear reminder of how interconnected our world really is.
Decisions in one place truly ripple outwards.
So as you think about all these complex dynamics, these shifts in power and policy, here's a final thought to mull over. How quickly can something that seems unimaginable today become the new reality tomorrow in world affairs or even domestic policy? What new possibilities, or perhaps what hidden challenges, do you see emerging from these major shifts we've discussed?